The song playing when my marriage ended before it began was Can't Help Falling in Love. I remember that detail clearly because I had chosen it myself. 3 months of wedding planning, 14 weekends of venue tours and cake tastings, and arguments about centerpieces. And the song that was playing when the man I had loved for 5 years walked to the microphone and quietly, methodically set our future on fire was the song I had specifically requested because it reminded me of the night he proposed. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, every sign was there. But love has a way of translating red flags into love languages, and I was fluent. My name is not important. What happened to me that Saturday afternoon in a rented ballroom in front of 300 people, that matters. Because what I did in response changed everything, and I mean everything. Here is what you need to understand about Marcus before I tell you what he did. Marcus was the kind of man other women pointed at. Not because he was extraordinarily handsome, though he was, but because of how he treated his mother. On our 3rd date, he left dinner early because she called saying she couldn't sleep. I thought, this man knows how to love. On our 1st anniversary, he flew her in from out of state as a surprise. She sat between us at dinner. I thought, he is generous. When he mentioned, casually, over pasta, that he sent her $2,000 a month, I thought, he is responsible. I was collecting evidence for a case I had already decided to rule in his favor. The verdict was going to cost me $90,000 and 5 years of my life. The wedding was his mother's production from the beginning. Eleanor did not suggest things. She informed you of decisions she had already made on your behalf. The venue, her choice. The guest list, her edit. My dress, she had opinions. When I pushed back on the centerpieces, she looked at me the way you look at a child mispronouncing a word. Patient, slightly amused, faintly condescending. Marcus always smoothed it over afterward. She just loves us. She wants it to be perfect. She means well. I know now what those phrases actually meant. They meant, I have never once told her no, and I am not starting today. The afternoon of our wedding, 300 guests filled that ballroom. My parents sat in the front row. My mother was already crying. Happy tears, she insisted. My father looked like a man trying very hard to contain pride that kept threatening to spill over. Marcus and I had just walked the aisle. The applause was fading. The MC was reaching for the microphone to begin the reception program. And then Marcus stepped forward. He didn't look at me when he took the mic. That was the first thing I noticed. In 5 years together, Marcus had never given a speech without finding my eyes first. It was our thing, his private way of saying, you are why I can do this. He didn't look for me. He looked at his mother. Before we begin, I want to make an announcement. The room settled. 300 people giving their attention to a groom on his wedding day. Nothing unusual there. I stood beside him in my dress, bouquet in both hands, and I felt something shift in the air, the way you feel a weather change before you can name it. Everything I am, I owe to one woman. A murmur of warmth rippled through the crowd. Guests smiled. His mother pressed a tissue to her eyes. So today, I am formally transferring all of my premarital assets, my 2 properties, my investments, my savings, to her, as a gift, because no amount of money can repay what she gave me. The room erupted. Not in the way rooms erupt at a punchline, in the way they erupt at a moment they've decided to call beautiful. People were standing. An uncle near the back shouted something about real sons being rare. 3 women at table 7 were openly weeping. My bouquet was shaking, not because my hands were trembling, because I had stopped breathing. And starting next month, Marcus continued, riding the applause like a wave, I'll be sending her $6,000 monthly. She sacrificed everything. The least I can do is make sure she never worries again. More applause. His mother stood. They embraced under a spotlight that had been placed there for our first dance. I did the math automatically. The way your brain sometimes processes the unbearable in numbers, because numbers don't hurt the same way words do. Marcus earned $15,000 a month. 6 to his mother. We had a mortgage of 7. That left $2,000 for groceries, utilities, emergencies, medical bills, the children we had talked about having, the life we had spent 5 years describing to each other in bed at night. $2,000. For a family. He turned to me then, finally, microphone extended, eyes bright with the confidence of a man who has just done something he believes is magnificent. You always said you loved how much I care for family. Tell everyone. You support this, right? 300 faces swiveled toward me. I saw my mother's expression. It was a specific kind of horror. Not the horror of shock, but the horror of recognition. She had seen something like this before, in someone else's marriage, and she had watched it slowly hollow that person out. I saw my father start to rise from his chair. I saw Marcus's relatives watching me with a particular expression I will never forget. It was a test disguised as an expectation. Be gracious. Be supportive. Be what a good wife looks like in this family. And I understood, in that moment, with absolute clarity, what the rest of my life would look like if I smiled and took that microphone and said, of course, I support you, how could I not? I understood because I could see it completely. Not vaguely, not as a fear, but as a fact laid out in front of me like a blueprint. I would smile today. I would resent it quietly for months. I would fight about money privately while performing harmony publicly. I would fund a life that his mother had already decided to own. And one day, years from now, I would be sitting across from a therapist or a divorce attorney, or both, trying to explain how I had walked into this with my eyes open. I took the microphone. Since we're making announcements, I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised me, I have one too. I turned to Marcus. His smile was still there, waiting. I'm not getting married today. You know that sound a room makes when it doesn't know what sound to make? It's not silence exactly. It's the absence of the sound that was supposed to happen. 300 people inhaled simultaneously and then simply held it. Marcus's smile didn't fall immediately. It recalibrated. What? You made a financial decision that affects both of us. Our mortgage, our future children, our entire household, without a single conversation with me. Not a discussion, not a heads-up, a public announcement, designed to make me either agree publicly or be the villain who doesn't support his love for his mother. I choose villain. His mother was on her feet. Marcus grabbed for my arm. I stepped back, one clean step, and continued. The down payment on the home we were going to share was split equally between our families. My parents contributed $90,000. If your assets now belong to your mother, I'd like to know which account that $90,000 went into. The room cracked open. What followed was not elegant. Marcus's family came at me in waves, aunts, cousins, a grandmother who had somehow produced a remarkable amount of volume for someone her age. I was called ungrateful, calculating, cold. Someone used the phrase gold digger with the confidence of someone who had never looked up what the words meant. My best friend Rachel got to the stage first. She stood beside me without saying anything, which was more powerful than anything she could have said. My father made it to the foot of the stage before my mother caught his arm. Marcus tried 3 different approaches in about 90 seconds. Confusion, then anger, then a public attempt at tenderness that the microphone picked up perfectly. Katie, come on. We can talk about this at home. Everyone is watching. You should have thought about everyone watching, I said, before you made your announcement. I took off my ring. I had practiced nothing. I had planned nothing, but I had spent 5 years watching the woman I was about to become, and I knew her face, and I did not want it. I pressed the ring into his palm. I expect the $90,000 returned within 7 days. My lawyer will handle the rest. I handed the MC the microphone and walked off the stage. The week that followed was not triumphant. Let me be honest about that, because the stories that skip this part are lying to you. I spent the first night on Rachel's bathroom floor, still in my wedding dress, because I hadn't been able to figure out how to get out of it alone, and I hadn't wanted to call my mother because she would cry, and I couldn't hold anyone else's grief that night. I cried for exactly 1 hour. I had given myself that. Then I washed my face, borrowed Rachel's sweats, and called an attorney at 9 the next morning. His name was Daniel Mercer. He was 62 years old, had seen everything, and looked at my situation with the mild interest of a man reviewing a moderately complex crossword. "The 90,000, he said, is recoverable. It's a conditional gift made in contemplation of marriage. Marriage didn't happen. The condition wasn't met. And the watch I gave him? Omega, 15,000. I have the receipt. That too. How do we start? Certified demand letter, sent to his home and his office." I paused. His office? Mercer allowed himself a small smile. People become motivated very quickly when their professional environment becomes aware of their personal choices. Marcus came to my office on day 2. I want to be precise about what happened, because the version that circulated later, the version his family told, left out several details. He arrived at my workplace unannounced. He raised his voice in the reception area. He grabbed my wrist when I turned to leave, hard enough that I still had a mark the next morning. Security escorted him out. I submitted the footage to my attorney the same afternoon. That evening, I received a notification. He had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation of conduct unbecoming his director position. Marcus called me 9 times. The 10th call, I answered. "You went to my office. You sent letters to my office. You're destroying my career." "Marcus," I said, "I didn't send anyone to your office. I sent a legal document to your office. What happened to your career is a consequence your company chose, based on your behavior. Those are different things." A long silence. "I don't have the 90,000 liquid. My mum put it in certificates. I can't access it fast. You have 5 days. Katie, 5 days. Anything after that is a conversation between your attorney and mine." I hung up. On day 4, his mother came to my apartment. I had expected many things from Eleanor. Fury, manipulation, a performance of maternal grief, so convincing it might have earned awards in a different context. I had not expected her to bring a cashier's check for the full 90,000 and throw it on my coffee table like she was disposing of something that had offended her. "Take it," she said, "and disappear." I looked at the check. I looked at her. And I did something that visibly unnerved her. I pushed it back. "Marcus sends this, not you. This is between him and me." She stared at me. "You think you won something," she said finally. "I think I avoided something," I answered. "There's a difference." She left. I texted Mercer. He told me not to accept money directly from the mother. It could complicate the legal standing of the original claim. I had made the right call by instinct, which was the moment I started to trust my instincts again. 3 days later, Eleanor posted. It was a masterpiece of strategic victimhood. Photographs of Marcus as a child, as a teenager, at his graduation, Eleanor always present, always sacrificing, always the invisible engine behind his success. Then the pivot. A woman had entered their lives. A woman who, when her husband demonstrated his beautiful devotion to his mother, had thrown a public tantrum and was now extorting $90,000 from a grieving family. The comments moved fast. They always do when the story is simple and the villain is pre-assigned. I read it once. I called Mercer. Then I sat down and wrote the most precise document of my life. Not emotional, not defensive, chronological, bank statements, time-stamped texts, security footage from my office, a photo of Eleanor's cashier's check on my coffee table, rejected, the full text of her post, screenshot. "This is what happened. These are the records. I reserve the right to pursue defamation claims against anyone who continues to spread provably false information." I sent it to Mercer first. He called back in 11 minutes. "Publish it." The share count hit 4 figures in an hour. What I did not expect was losing my job anyway. My HR director called me into her office. She was not unkind. She was also not brave. "The company feels the public nature of this situation has created reputational adjacency risk." I stared at her. "We'd like to offer you a paid leave of absence while—" "I resign," I said, effective at the end of my notice period. "The reason on my file will be voluntary resignation, no ethics violations noted. If that's not acceptable, I'll be filing a wrongful constructive dismissal complaint before the end of the week." She blinked. "That's acceptable." Walking out, my manager Elena caught up with me in the hall. She had been my mentor for 4 of my 6 years there. She looked genuinely devastated. "You deserved better than this from us." "I know," I said. "Give me a reference. Whenever you need it." The money arrived on day 6. Marcus's public apology followed 40 minutes later. Handwritten, photographed, posted. His mother's came an hour after that, shorter and more generic, but public. I deleted my post, left a single line, "Matter resolved. Thank you for your support." I did not feel victorious. I felt something quieter and more durable than victory. I felt like someone who had been through a fire and discovered, on the other side, that the fire had only burned what didn't belong there anyway. And then I found out he was getting married again, 6 weeks later, to someone named Jenna, who was, according to Rachel's network of contacts, 3 months pregnant. I sat with that information for a while. I waited to feel something sharp, jealousy, rage, the specific sting of being replaced. What I felt instead was a strange, hollow pity, not for Jenna, not even for Marcus, for what was coming for both of them. I had lived inside that dynamic for 5 years and barely escaped it. Jenna was walking in with a child on the way, and Eleanor already embedded in the architecture of her future. I sent no warnings. It was not my war anymore. I took a month off before starting my new job. I slept 9 hours a night. I cooked things I had never had time to cook. I called my grandmother every Sunday. I repainted my living room a shade of yellow that Marcus had vetoed 3 years ago, citing resale value. I was hired as VP of marketing at a company where the CEO, interviewing me, said, "I read about what happened. The way you handled it, factual, calm, proportionate. That's exactly the decision-making framework I want on my executive team." The salary was 35% above my previous position. 6 weeks into the new job, something happened that I want to tell you carefully, because the temptation in stories like this is to make the ending feel like a reward for the suffering, and I don't believe that's true. The suffering happened. What came after was separate. I ran into someone I had known in graduate school. His name was James. We had been something, briefly, the kind of something that ends not from lack of feeling, but from wrong timing and too little courage. He was in the city consulting for a client. We had coffee, then dinner, then a Saturday walk that lasted 4 hours and covered 11 miles without either of us noticing. He was not a contrast to Marcus. I want to be clear about that. He was not the lesson Marcus was supposed to teach me, arriving on cue to demonstrate what love done right looks like. He was his own person, with his own complications and history and flaws. But here is what I noticed, slowly, over the weeks we spent rebuilding something that had never quite finished starting. He never once made a decision that affected both of us without asking me first. Not once. It sounds simple. It was everything. A year and a half later, we got married. Small ceremony. 40 people. A venue that cost a fraction of the ballroom and felt 100 times more like us. I wrote my own vows. James wrote his. Neither of us used the phrase, "you complete me," because we are both adults who had been complete before we found each other, and the relationship we were building was not a rescue operation. What I said was this: I spent 5 years confusing compliance with love. I know the difference now. What we have is different. It is chosen, daily, by both of us. That is what I am committing to. James said, "I promise to always ask, and to listen to the answer." My father cried. My mother told him to stop, then cried harder. At the reception, Rachel pulled me onto the dance floor during the 3rd song and leaned in close. "You know what you built here?" "What?" "A life that actually fits you." I looked around the room. 40 people who had earned the right to be there. A husband who did not require an audience to feel certain of his own goodness, a version of myself I did not have to perform. "Yeah," I said. I really did. I heard later, through the particular osmosis of shared social networks, that Marcus and Jenna had separated. That Eleanor had done to Jenna what she had tried to do to me, but Jenna had no exit savings, and a toddler, and fewer options. I heard this, and I felt nothing I am proud of, and nothing I am ashamed of. I felt the way you feel looking at wreckage from a great distance, aware of it, untouched by it, relieved you are no longer inside it. I am telling you this story because the version of events that circulated in that ballroom, on social media, in whispers between relatives, it made me into a villain for 18 months. A woman who embarrassed her husband, a woman who chose money over forgiveness. A woman who could have stayed quiet and worked it out privately like a reasonable person. I want to tell you what I actually chose. I chose not to spend the next decade being slowly convinced that my silence was love and my disappearance was peace. I chose the discomfort of one terrible afternoon over the slow erosion of everything I was. And I want to tell you, in case you are sitting somewhere right now, holding your own bouquet, watching someone take a microphone that wasn't meant for them, that the most dangerous moment is not the public humiliation. The most dangerous moment is the one right before it, when you are deciding whether to smile. Don't smile. Take the microphone.